It's been a long wait, but AMD's 7800 XT, I guess mid-range graphics card is here. And this card just launching apparently pushed the price of the 6800 XT over to $484. But in terms of specs, these cards are really weird. They have the same amount of VRAM, 16 gigabytes, and the same memory bus width at 256 bits. But the GDDR6 VRAM on the 7800 XT is clocked higher than the 6800 XT. But even though the 7800 XT is a newer card, it actually has less compute units, so the actual processors on the chip. So how does this compare against its last generation counterpart? We're gonna start this off in Starfield, and I just kind of picked a planet, I think it's called Sumati. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. But in this game, the 7800 XT is pushing about 11% more frames than the 6800 XT. What about in Remnant 2? This game is also very demanding. The 7800 XT is 8% faster in this game. Whoa, 8%, that's crazy. All right, in Cyberpunk, oh my god, guys, we just got up to 11%. We're going absolutely hog wild in this game. But from that high, we get slapped in the face by Last of Us. Man, it's only 5%, I'm sad. So generally speaking, the games that I tested, we get around 7 to 10% faster on the 7800 XT, and that's at 1440p, because this card is targeted at 1440p, and I'll just show you 1080p real quick. Most of the time you can max out games at it, but I don't even need to really talk about VRAM here, because I have about the same 16 gigabytes. But what I need to say is in Fortnite DirectX 11, this is giving me flashbacks of the 4060 Ti versus the 3060 Ti. The 7800 XT loses 12% slower here. My PTSD is kicking in.
They've done it. They've made the worst $400 generational improvement ever to launch in this industry.
Can't wait for AMD to completely blow this opportunity. Bro, I'm sad that this guy's speaking the truth. So yeah, like 7% extra performance around about that on average at rasterization in games. It's really exciting stuff, huh? The 7800 XT, I mean, it's just blowing your socks off. I bet you're wondering, that's how it did in rasterization, but you know, it's been in the oven, RDNA 3, for, 3 years at this point in time versus its 6800 XT counterpart. How is it at ray tracing? Well, it's better. Here in Cyberpunk at the RT Ultra preset 1080p, we're getting about 40 FPS. I mean, like, well, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the RTX 3080 to this mix, because you can find 3080s on the used market for $400 right now compared to a $500 7800 XT if you're willing to buy used. Yeah, the 3080 blows both of these cards out of the water, and if we up it to 1440p, it's a little bit different, but mostly the same story. The 7800 XT is still faster than the 6800 XT at ray tracing, but is it enough to make it good performance? Not really. Although in some games that don't have as heavy of ray tracing, like just Shadows and Plague Tale Requiem here, things can get a little bit closer. You might be able to use it on the 7800 XT. It doesn't really feel worth it though. But the headlining features that are launching with the 7800 XT and 7700 XT is HYPR-RX with AMD's drivers and FSR 3.0, which has frame generation on it. So I was like, oh, we're gonna go check this out and everything, it's gonna be awesome. And in the press driver, because this is basically a preview driver, it did have HYPR-RX in it. And one of the features that HYPR-RX is touting right now is that it includes anti-lag plus, which is gonna be a competitor to NVIDIA's Reflex. So this should reduce the system latency so that you have better response times as you move your mouse around. Or in order to use frame generation, you need less latency on your computer. But when I hopped in game and I wanted to try out anti-lag plus to test the system latency, so at 165 FPS, 8.5 milliseconds of latency with anti-lag plus, okay? Let's turn off anti-lag. So does it affect it at all right now? It actually seems lower now. It didn't really do anything, at least in Overwatch 2. Kind of confused. Maybe it just didn't work in Overwatch 2. Or I also wanted to test out what other features does HYPR-RX enable. Well, it also turns on Radeon Super Resolution within AMD's Adrenalin driver, which is basically just FSR, but it's not integrated into the game. It's integrated into the driver. So what you'll do is you'll go into a game and set your resolution of that game lower, and then it will actually upscale it through your driver to whatever resolution your monitor is. It's kind of niche when it comes down to it, because most games that are graphically demanding that you'd want to do upscaling in probably already have upscalers in them anyways. We know how developers are nowadays. Just put upscalers in it and it optimizes the game for you. You know what I mean? As well as HYPR-RX turns on dynamic resolution scaling, which just means when your frames drop, then your resolution will drop and then it'll be upscaled to try to make it look decent. But it tries to do that in real time to keep your frame rate stable in the game. And this has been around like forever. But I know what a lot of you guys are waiting for is like, well, did you get to test AMD fluid motion frames?
How about every DirectX 11 and DirectX 12 game you play, we can double and triple your frame rate. Wouldn't you like that?
I went to do that on the press driver and it wasn't there. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I couldn't test it. It wasn't in the press driver. But as soon as the launch drivers come out for the 7800 XT, this feature might be exclusive to 7000 series graphics cards. That's what we're gonna have to check. But I'm going to try and test this for you guys to get it out there as fast as possible. Also confirm if it were to work on, say, the 6800 XT or something like that. But I do have to clarify though with HYPR-RX and using Anti-Lag Plus, this was a press driver. And I'm actually not even sure if it worked with Overwatch 2. That's the only game I tested, and the only game I had time to test it in. So I bet a lot of you guys are wondering, well, if HYPR-RX isn't that interesting, and I couldn't even try the AMD fluid motion frames, and the performance compared to the last generation 6800 XT isn't all that impressive. It's the same price too. Where does the 7800 XT actually show its value? It's actually on the new market compared to NVIDIA right now. The 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte graphics card, so the one that everybody clowned on and trashed, this card is actually falling below its MSRP at $500, because at $500 this card was going to be competing directly with the 7800 XT, and in terms of performance it was going to completely blow it out the water. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see this go even lower. But that also means that we could see cards like the RTX 4070, which deliver very similar performance to the 7800 XT, but the 7800 XT costs $100 less and it has more VRAM. The 4070 only has 12 gigabytes. It could definitely bring down the price of the 4070, especially now that there's a little bit of wiggle room. So it's obviously clear with its performance and its $500 price point, the 7800 XT is a decent deal, and it's actually changing the cards around it and how those prices are affected. Not to mention, one last benefit to get the 7800 XT over the 6800 XT is actually its power efficiency. You guys probably looked at the benchmarks and didn't see a huge difference between the power draw of the 6800 XT and the 7800 XT. But what I have to tell you is that I'm not sure if numbers are being reported exactly perfectly, because this is like a press driver. But the 6800 XT, so the last generation card, when gaming in Resident Evil 4, I guess, drew about 447 watts for the entire system from the wall, while the 7800 XT drew only 390 watts. So technically from the wall, about 60 watts less. And when I just did a synthetic test like MSI Combustor, which is just a stock, little benchmark thing, the 6800 XT drew about 425 watts, while the 7800 XT drew 338 watts for the entire system. So in this case, there's actually almost a 90 watt difference between these two graphics cards. And that's not anything to ignore. And that's what brings me to the most bizarre part of the 7800 XT. It's not this. It's not the name itself or the pricing or the performance. It's actually this. So the cooler, this cooler with the card's power draw is so overbuilt. It is actually about the same size as a 6800 XT's cooler, which draws way more power. See, the Hellhound one ran like an absolute dream. With the side panel off of my case, under full load for 15 minutes testing a benchmark or a game, this card was only barely pushing 60 degrees. Yeah, 60 degrees. This card was chilling. And I swear to you, I do not live in Antarctica, and the fans are only spinning at 35% of their capacity. This card was so quiet, it was ridiculous. I love how freaking quiet it is. And if you're curious, the hot spot on this particular graphics card only ever hit 70 degrees. And I'm not kidding, this card performed very, very well. Okay, so that means that probably other AIB partner models of the 7800 XT probably gonna perform pretty well also. But because this card is so overbuilt and excessive, it really got me wondering, could I overclock this thing? It has 370 watts of power available to it, and it has to be drawing like around 200 watts or somewhere in there. So that's tons of headroom, right? So I tried it. I tried overclocking the 7800 XT. It didn't really do anything, guys. This was one of the most disappointing parts. I thought it was gonna be able to do so much more. I could barely push this card without it wanting to crash from an overclock. And granted, this was a press driver for the 7800 XT, so it is possible that maybe it'd be more stable on a release driver. And I was really hoping that you could squeeze more and more performance out of this to, you know, widen the gap between the 6800 XT, and that just didn't happen. But probably not as disappointing as what the 7800 XT could have been. Like, it's obvious that the 7800 XT is a decent value at $500. If it and the 6800 XT are both at the same price, there is no reason to buy the 6800 XT. Old gen is dead at that point. The 7800 XT is the clearly better value. It has slightly better performance, not earth-shattering performance. You get an AV1 encoder and has better power efficiency. What kills me is what this card could have been. And also seeing the significant efficiency improvements that are on the 7800 XT versus the 6800 XT. Does have less compute units, so 83% of the compute units in the 6800 XT, but it does have similar performance. And this could also mostly be because of the VRAM bandwidth improvements of higher clocked GDDR6 on the 7800 XT. What if the 7800 XT actually had the same number of compute units as the 6800 XT? Well, this story would be a lot different, because would we be seeing about 30% faster performance on the 7800 XT for the same price? Well, the main issue with that is this card, the RX 7900 XT, which we all know AMD really screwed up the launch of, pricing it at $900, 30% faster than the 6800 XT, which is obviously problematic when you want to make a 7800 XT that would give good price to performance for the next generation. This just further proves that the 7900 XT always should have been a 7800 XT. Whether it would have been priced at $500 like the card we have now, I don't really know. And this all really comes down to how AMD screwed up this launch, or just the whole rollout of RDNA 3 in general, how they still aren't offering that good of value. Because the 7800 XT at $500, yes, it's an okay deal versus the last generation card, but it's not earth-shattering. It's not going to get people running out and buying them. They basically re-released the 6800 XT again. But I guess if you're shopping at $500 and you're mostly focused on game performance, the 7800 XT is technically the best deal that's there. But what I will say, at least, they gave me the 7800 XT to test. I'm glad they sent me this one, because it doesn't seem like things are even going to be this positive. I'm not saying I was even that positive about the 7800 XT. It's not going to be that positive against the 7700 XT either, because that graphics card is coming in at $450. Only $50 difference between these two graphics cards. But the 7700 XT is significantly cut down versus the 7800 XT. So literally it's losing 4 gigabytes of VRAM, a significant amount of bandwidth, and a decent amount of its GPU core. And from what I've seen on leaked benchmarks, this is from videocards.com, there's a pretty decent gap between them. I also just wanted to say, like, wrapping up this video, just wanted to say thank you to them for sending this out again. And it's been a pretty cool experience. Let me know what you guys think about the 7800 XT. Was this the thing that you're waiting for? Is this satisfying what you're waiting for? To me, it wouldn't satisfy me, but you know, if you're going to spend that much anyways, like how long can you keep waiting? I don't really know. I don't think this is going to be flying off shelves. Let me know what you think though, and you guys have a good rest of your day or whatever you're doing, and see you in the next video. Peace.